Welcome back, everyone, to the Jake Broe Show. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Zarina Zabrisky. If you've been following this channel for the last couple of years, I've shared numerous of her clips. I've really appreciated her on-the-ground reporting in Ukraine. But if you're not familiar with her, let me give you her backstory. Zarina is an award-winning author of 5 books and a U.S. journalist. She's a war correspondent for Byline Times in the UK, as well as Euromaidan Press in Ukraine. She has contributed to the BBC News, CBC Radio, Voice of America, TVP World, The Sunday Post, and more. She co-produced and starred in the documentary Under Deadly Skies with John Sweeney and Kaylin Robertson. She's on the channel today to promote her latest documentary about the city of Kherson, the Human Safari. Zarina, it's fantastic to finally meet you and talk to you, on camera, but how are you doing today?
Hi, Jake. Thank you so much for making time. Thank you for helping to share the word, share my reports from the ground in Kherson for all this time. It's really appreciated. And I'm excited and looking forward to this conversation.
Over the last 3 years, I've probably shared a couple dozen of your clips. Unfortunately, you do share a lot of reports that involve people who have passed away, people who have suffered, and that's not something I can easily share on YouTube. But anytime I can share one of your reports, I greatly appreciate it. But I don't really know you. I know your reports, so I'd like to get a little bit of your backstory. Can you talk about where you were born, where you grew up, and just your backstory, how you eventually got to the point of reporting in Ukraine?
Right. Well, thank you for your interest. I truly believe that the journalist is not the story. I only will share as much as needed in the context so you can have a better feeling of my reports. And again, I don't want to take away from Kherson and Ukraine. I was born in the Soviet Union. At the time, it was one big country that had Russia, Ukraine, and a bunch of other places called Republic at the time. My background is Jewish, Ukrainian ethnically, and I spent part of my childhood in Russia and part in Ukraine. And eventually I moved to America, and I lived all my life, conscious life in the States. I'm an American citizen and journalist and writer. I write and publish in English. Byline Times is a British newspaper, my main outlet. I also write for Euromaidan Press, which is an Ukrainian outlet, but in English. And that's pretty much the story. I really moved to Ukraine on a permanent basis from the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022.
I know you said you're not the story, the journalist should not be the story, but can you talk about your motivations for picking up and moving to Ukraine to cover this war? Why did you do it?
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. It was a natural step for me because I've been fighting the hybrid war way before it became a full-scale conventional war. Namely in 2012, I became politically involved when the Russian group Pussy Riot got imprisoned, and that kind of started my involvement with the politics. And since then, especially in 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine by annexing Crimea and starting the proxy war in Donbass in eastern Ukraine. I've been already involved writing about it. I've been writing a lot about the Kremlin narratives and Russian propaganda, combat propaganda, which I happen to know well because I studied it in school. I was forced to take a course when I was studying literature in university. I'm a major in literature and I'm a writer, but the reality was such in the Soviet Union that you had to study what was called combat propaganda. And if you search, there are many, many articles and shows and talks and seminars that I held on the subject. And then when the full-scale invasion started, it was just the next stage, and it was only natural for me to move and become on-the-ground reporter.
Your latest documentary you have out, it's titled Kherson Human Safari. I do want to let the audience know you can watch this documentary today, but it's not on social media yet. You have to go to the documentary's website. I'm going to put the link down below in the description, as well as the pinned comment. You can go to that website to obtain all the information, all the contact info. If you want to support any of the people of Kherson, there are donation links, as well as supporting the film and supporting Zarina. I watched the documentary yesterday, and I it's hard to say I enjoyed it. You know, you don't enjoy the content material, you enjoy the production and the message you're trying to get out to the world, raising awareness of what's going on. So your documentary covers basically the different phases of Kherson over the last 3.5 years, from the invasion, the occupation, the liberation, the flood, which is something that people should not forget about, and then the last year, the human hunting, the human safari. I know Kherson, it was the regional capital of this oblast, pre-war population, I think it was close to 300,000. My first question is, how many people are remaining in the city? What are the estimates that you've heard of the remaining population, given it's no longer safe to live there for anyone?
A great question, and I would be happy to cover it. It's not an easy question to answer, but before we go there, I want to specify that yes, the film is available now, maybe for a limited time from the website, and there is a donation page for the people of Kherson, but there is no need to support the film or me. That's already covered, and it's a non-commercial project. It's very important for me. Whatever money will be made or you decide to donate is going strictly, directly to the people of Kherson and the families suffering from the latest Russian war crimes there. Other than that, film is free to watch because we want to raise the awareness. Our crew is dedicated to do something, not just show you the film. And that having been said, the numbers that I get from the military administration in Kherson is between 60 and 80,000. It is very hard to make this number more exact than that because people also come and go. There are many families that I know, and I live there. Right now I'm in the States on a personal visit, but because that's where I'm from. But generally speaking, I'm based in Kherson, living downtown, not far from the Freedom Square. And I know a lot of people, and I see them leave and then return, and leave and return. And you might ask, why is this happening? There are many reasons. One of them is logistics. In order to move somewhere, you have to have money. And we're talking about the city which has been in intense stages of war, different ones, occupation, then intense shelling, now human safari, for all in all 3 years. And there are no jobs, there's no money. And many people who run and escape and move somewhere to Mykolaiv or Odessa or even Lviv return back because here they might have a ruined house, but it's their house. And sharing a gym in a school somewhere in Lviv is not something that you want to do when you have children or dogs. And that is one of the reasons. There's another reason which is a little bit harder to understand, I've noticed, especially here in the West or globally, in a safe place, I should say. And it's a mix of pride, patriotism, and generally speaking, resistance. People want to stay as an act of resistance. And often when I speak to someone, they say, this is my home, this is my street. Why should I be leaving? They will not get us to move.
It's staggering to think about. You toss out these numbers, a city with a pre-war population, 300,000 down to about 60. That's 80% of a major city being depopulated. So I don't think the Ukrainian government has ordered an evacuation. Like, I don't think the capital city of Kyiv has told people they can't live there because it's not safe. It's a personal choice. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think people should try and stay there, remain? I understand your arguments. Why be a refugee when you can just stay in your home, even though it's not safe? Neither situation is ideal. But do you think there should be some kind of general evacuation order and civilians should not be allowed to remain in the city?
Well, it's a very good question again, but I think it's very important to make ethical choices. I'm a reporter there and I'm a foreign journalist. So I'm not in the position to give any advice, neither to the government nor to the population of Kherson or Ukraine. I am there to register and report and create evidence for later, for hopefully tribunals, because we are definitely seeing forced displacement due to the Russian war crimes and war crimes against humanity. What I observe is that there are orders, in fact, to leave and evacuate in certain zones, especially for the families with children. And there are different degrees of the orders. There could be like compulsory evacuation, and that does work for some of the areas where it's impossible to live at this point. And these are coastal areas, and some villages and suburbs. We also have to realize that we're not talking about a city like in a bubble. We're talking just like any modern city. That's an urban community which consists of the city, which is, the nuclear city, and then all the satellite suburbs and villages. So when we're saying 300,000, we're talking about the whole area. And we also need to refresh a little bit our geography. It's a unique positioning of the city and the region, which is called Oblast in Ukraine. The major part of it is on the what they call left bank of the Dnipro River, and the city is on the right. Well, the more conventional one is the east and west, but for some reason they use right and left. So just for the ease of imagining that, and I'm not the one who invented it, many people use it, you can take any major city located on the river, say London, right on the Thames, and there will be people on the one side and on the other. Or I'm from San Francisco, so I always use Berkeley and San Francisco. So imagine Berkeley is occupied and San Francisco is not. And so you naturally have your friends and relatives in Oakland, Berkeley, and so forth. And that creates quite a difficult situation, on many, many levels. The people who are living right by the river, called coastal areas, have mostly moved, even since I started to work on the project and started to report from Kherson. Many of my friends who live right by the river are not staying there anymore, not just because of the shelling, but also because at this point the human safari took a new turn and there is a lot of fires and the Russian drones drop incendiary devices and Molotov type explosives on the residential areas, burning blocks. So very few people are really staying there. And whether the government should issue a compulsory evacuation order, again, not for me to decide. But even if they did, it doesn't mean that it would be immediately executed just because of the difficulty of getting there. I've been on evacuation trips with the rescuers and with the volunteers and services who run such operations, and they're mostly done either at night or during the rainy weather, because that's the only time when we can reach there without drones following. Usually at this point, it's an armored vehicle, and it has a couple of jammers on the roof. And, it's quite impressive. I shared videos of such evacuation trips. It's very hard. Like, there was one family that I've been following since the start of my reporting there. And that's a very unfortunate family with a small child. And for a week, we could not organize the rescue vehicle to take them out of where they were in Antonievka because nobody could reach them.
Families with children. In your documentary, you mentioned the regional puppet theater of Kherson, as well as it seemed like the Russians, immediately when they took the city, they were very interested in children, wanting to take children to what did they call it? Health improvement camps, but really they're propaganda and re-education camps to Russify them. Can you talk about, are there any estimates or numbers how many children from Kherson specifically were taken by the Russians? I know they emptied out the orphanages when they took the city, but were there other families where maybe the Russians were intending on giving them back after summer camp was over? But how many children potentially were taken by the Russians in the early months of the occupation?
I don't have the exact number, and I don't think anybody does, but I follow the news of returning children, and approximately twice a week we read about few children being returned from the Russian Federation and from the occupied territories. So it's still a process. We're talking about thousands. We're talking overall, from Ukraine. And it's quite a well-known fact that there was an arrest order issued for Putin and his close associate for the Hague court for kidnapping children. And a lot of these children were from the occupied areas of Kherson region. And I spoke to quite a few mothers and quite a few families which lost their children, and some of them still are working on returning them back. For some of them, because it's an ongoing story, just as with partisans, this is not something that we can share yet because it's work in progress, and oversharing can, interfere with the process of returning the children. There's one mother in particular that I'm in touch with, and they cannot locate their child. The child was handicapped physically and mentally and was in a special boarding school that helped attending to his needs. And that school was on the occupied part on the left bank, on the eastern bank. And when the Russians retreated from the Kherson region on the other side, they decided to move the orphanage or the boarding school, and we don't know exactly where this child ended up. And so it's been over a year, it's been almost 2 years that the parents are still looking for this boy. And I know it's ongoing. I spoke to quite a few people who were hiding their kids at home and would just homeschool them because they were afraid that the children would be stolen. I spoke to another lady, Olga Tsilenko, who runs a center for children, for handicapped children, and she also has her own kids. And she was telling me that the Russians would come and round up kids in the school and say, hey, you're going now. So, gather your stuff and you're going. And so many people just would not let the kids out of the house during the occupation.
In the documentary, I think it was the woman who would be embroidering shirts, but she was talking about her husband who was older than she was. And he grew up in the Soviet Union, believing all the Soviet propaganda about Russians and Ukrainians have brotherly love for each other. So when the Russians took the city, he wasn't concerned or alarmed at all. He thought, these people are here to help us and protect us potentially. He then passed away shortly after the city was taken. Can you just talk a little bit more about their backstory and their, how that dynamic played out?
Yes, that just like any other story, that was fascinating. This artist Alena Malarenko, she's an artist, a writer, a playwright, a singer. She's just so multi-talented. It was so. I was so overwhelmed just working with her. And her husband, former pilot, he wasn't exactly thinking that the Russians arrived to protect them, but he thought it would be okay. They're not going to hurt them. And when the Russians were trying to break into an apartment in their building, he just came up to them and started to speak to them, saying something like, sons or brothers, why are you doing this? And the Russians pushed him with the AK, with a machine gun, and told him, get the hell out of here. And they were very hurtful. And his world was crushed. He came back home, she told me, and fell apart. And then soon after that, he had a stroke. And he never recovered from the stroke. And before that, he was quite in good health. So eventually he died. And her story of her sitting next to him doing this embroidery to finish for him for his birthday, and then him passing away just before Easter, the day before she finished this embroidery. It was very moving. Even as I talk about it, I'm getting goosebumps. And there's so many stories like this, and that just brings back to mind this other lady telling about her husband dying during the occupation, and her not being able to go to the cemetery to visit because of the drones hunting them down the street. That's just one of many stories like that.
I did a podcast interview, this was maybe over 2 years ago, with Timothy Morales. Do you know who Timothy Morales is? He is the American citizen that was hiding in the city of Kherson for the entire occupation.
Yes.
He and his ex-wife, he's American, also I think a British citizen, but he had his ex-wife's home and then his home, and he had nothing else to do. He had to hide from the Russians the entire time. Because he was a U.S. citizen, he would have been taken away and disappeared. But yeah, he would go back and forth between these two apartments because it was the only thing he could do, passing by cemeteries. He wrote a book about his experience. But I asked him, like, how do you survive when you aren't earning money and all the city services are slowly breaking down? So the city of Kherson under occupation, can you talk at all about what people did to survive when public utilities were being shut down or failing, and there were food shortages? And I just can't imagine what it'd be like for hundreds of thousands of people trying to find a way to make it work and survive under the worst conditions.
Yes, that's the part that was probably the hardest one for me to work on for the film, because I wasn't there during the occupation. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to work there. So I just had to interview a lot of people and get the archives. And it was very difficult to get the archives because people couldn't keep any pictures or any videos. Russians would stop you in the street and search you and look into your phones, look into your social media. So people would destroy everything they had. And there's very little left, but there is some left. And so I spent basically 2 years recovering the archives. And one of the major source of material is from this young family. Valentina Fedorchuk is the journalist, and her husband, who helped her and basically became her cameraman. They are just heroes, they continued to broadcast from the occupied Kherson, and they saved the archives, and they very generously allowed me to use their archives for the film to get this message out into the world. So they were telling me and showing, on their footage, the empty stores, the lines for food, the little spontaneous market where people would exchange and sell whatever they grew in their kitchen gardens or whatever they had in their kitchen cabinets, because Ukrainians are very good at preparing food and at really keeping good stock of anything, in case something goes wrong. So there was a lot of canned, pickled cucumbers, tomatoes, whatnot, of any sort of food. They were surviving. Kherson is a very rich agriculturally area. You walk down the street in summer and there are apricots falling down as a drone buzzing by, or there are cherries. You can stop by and have some berries. So in summer, that wasn't really an issue. They grow everything. In winter, it was much harder, but they managed to, fortunately, Russians occupied Kherson on the 1st of March, really, technically. They started the invasion on 24th of February. It took about a week of intense fighting. By the 1st of March, they were there, and they had to retreat on the 11th of November. So it was 9 months, and the summer people could find their procurement one way or another. And then November was already cold. That was the first time I arrived in Kherson on the 14th of November, as we, as journalists, were allowed to enter. And at that point, it was harsh. I remember that very, very well. As much as there was overjoyment and ecstatic moods throughout the whole city. There was absolutely nothing in the stores, in whatever stores were open. There was no electricity, no water, no connection. They brought Starlink in the Freedom Square in the middle of it, and everybody was there charging their phones. So I was running around interviewing all these people who were finally reaching to their relatives wherever in Ukraine or abroad, crying and laughing. It was nothing like I've ever lived in my life. The Liberation Day, there was something that I'm still living every time I talk about it, or every time I edit or watch that scene in the film. So yeah, it was very tough, but they survived. They more than survived. There was a lot of resistance going on, as one of the main leading featured people in the film saying, Victoria, she says, I believe every other person was in resistance, that people just didn't know about it, but they found a way to connect, and they found the way to pass the information on the conglomeration of the Russian troops, on the numbers, on their movements. And that, I believe, would be the whole entire different film, because I have a lot of interviews with partisans and resistance fighters, but a lot of them are still in the Russian prison right now. And they asked me not to publish anything because they are still hoping to get their loved ones back.
I also remember the liberation, November 11th, 2022. I was still making YouTube videos, and it felt amazing to see progress. But then the city has suffered a lot since then. So let's talk about the flood. Is there any doubt in anyone's minds that Russia blew up the Novokakhovka Dam and caused the flood? Like, has there been an official report, examination released by an international body or even the government of Ukraine saying this is the conclusive findings of this report that Russia mined the dam and blew it up?
Well, the New York Times reporting was very conclusive and very good. And of course, there are a lot of all sort of documents by the Ukrainian government. From what I understand, the major investigation will have to be done once the west, the eastern or the left bank is liberated, because there's a lot of people, and we talk about that in the film, who were killed by the flood at the time. And we don't have the numbers. We don't have the scale of the disaster, of the ecocide. So in order to have the full investigation, we'll have to wait some, but I think it has been established that the Russians were behind the explosion at Novakhovka Dam on the 6th of June 2022. And one of the groundbreaking interviews I had in this film, one of many, was with a priest who at the time was in the occupied area in Aleshki. That's the settlement on the other side, on the occupied side of the Dnipro River. And he was, after the flood, helping people to bury their relatives, with their religious services. So he first-hand saw and registered how many people were killed, murdered, whatever you want to call it, and how the Russian occupational authorities responded to the disaster. There were mass graves, and basically people were not allowed to bury their relatives. It's a devastating story. The film is not graphic. If you've noticed, Jake, we didn't go either for the shock factor, and we did not focus on the horror. It could have been the focus. There's enough horror going on there daily. I've reported in my daily videos on more horror than, one can really deal with, but I decided not to include most of it in the film because the goal is not to shock and not to scare the audiences off. The goal is to rather focus on the resistance and the spirit of the Ukrainians surviving this and on the survival. But this is one of the most shocking stories, what happened after the flood and how the Russians were responding by targeting the rescuers and by shelling and using pretty much any weapons available to stop the rescuers from helping people who were drowning.
Do you want to speculate why the Russians blew up the dam? Like, did they think it was to their benefit, or potentially was it an accident? Maybe they were just mining it in the event Ukraine tried to assault it, but then it accidentally went off.
Well, that is a funny thing. I appreciate that. No, I don't believe there are many accidents happening there. I firmly believe, and I wrote about it in the articles for Byline Times, that Russians apply there what is known as a scorched earth strategy, and that is a strategy of destroying pretty much any resource on the territory of adversary. To make sure that the military of the said adversary cannot move forward, cannot use this land as their grounds for further advancement. And they are doing it now by destroying the civil infrastructure, destroying energy infrastructure, destroying the water tanks, and destroying any resource, really. And the water dam was just one of such steps. It's a classical one, if you will. It was followed then, that was in June, and then in September they started to use guided aerial bombs en masse. And I was there for that, to report on that. And then for some reason, whether it was too expensive or it wasn't working out as well, they kind of stopped using as many guided aerial bombs and turned to the drones, small commercial drones, FPV drones, Mavic drones, and what we now call human safari. So there are different stages in the scorched earth strategy, and exploding the Kakhovka Dam is just one of these steps.
Operation Spiderweb was almost a month ago now, and it was shocking seeing that video. I can't remember if it was you that posted it, of the administrative capitol building of Kherson being bombed twice. The Russians hit it didn't quite destroy everything they wanted to destroy, so they hit it again like a couple hours later. But seeing the Ukrainian symbol from the regional building on the ground, obviously that was the image that the Russian military was going for. But do you think blowing up that building was supposed to be retribution for Operation Spiderweb, or were they just going to eventually do that anyways?
I mean, that's a good question, and it's debatable what's a retribution. They do things anyway, so
Yeah.
it's like up to us to decide whether we want to call it that or not. A lot of Ukrainians, including Ukrainian analysts and journalists, believe that it's a mistake to use the word retribution or revenge because, like I said, they're doing it anyway, and it would happen eventually. But what I can tell you is that because I was following up, and I know that there was a report of Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, personally following and watching on that day operation in Kherson. And that is because he was on the phone with Vladimir Saldo, who is the head of the occupational authority on the occupied part of the Kherson region. And Saldo reported on that on his Telegram channel, and it was followed up by several official Moscow Kremlin newspapers. And they all confirmed that, yes, Putin was on the phone with Saldo. He spoke about Kherson on that day, and he said that he's closely and personally watching the operation. So one can conclude that there's certain part of it was a revenge. What it was a revenge for, the operation that you mentioned, or any other. There was another operation that didn't get as much notice the same day or the day before the Operation Spiderweb, and that is the Ukrainian drones attack and the military, or rather the infrastructure supplying the military in the occupied areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson region, and it was very successful. So it could be that, but then it's just guessing. We wouldn't know that because we cannot ask these people why are they doing what they are doing.
Can I ask you about the dancing woman in the documentary? Can you give maybe a little bit of her story and what her place in relation to the city of Kherson is?
Right. I don't want to give away anything for those who decide to watch the film. So there are a couple of surprises there. And then, it's a documentary, so they're not plot development, but that was kind of a hidden surprise. And yes, we have a dancer. It is not somebody who was dancing elsewhere in Odessa or in London. This is all filmed in Kherson, on location, under fire. We had to hide while filming this choreographed scenes. And Alona is a dancer, and it's not her main occupation. Again, I don't want to give away anything, but she's just a resident of Kherson, just like everybody else and anybody else in the film. And other people are giving interviews and telling you their stories in words, some in Ukrainian, some in dialect, some in Russian, and some in English. Alona is telling her story and the story of Kherson in dance. And the music that she's dancing to is composed by a Khersonian composer, musician, and a partisan who is also featured in the film. And he's speaking about his music. He's speaking about his resistance, what he and his wife were doing to fight the Russians during the occupation. And so Alona is dancing to this music written in Kherson during the occupation, liberation, and afterwards. And that carries the story through. For me, it is also a symbol of the invincibility of Kherson. Kherson is really unbreakable. And the fact that people continue to not just dance, but also to work out. We have a yoga studio, which is a part of the film, and certain things happen to the yoga studio and the students of yoga throughout the war. And then they continue to do yoga. And unfortunately, after we finished filming, and since then, the yoga teacher who's telling the yoga studio story was injured by a drone and lost a part of her palm right now, like a week ago. So she is actually being treated for that now. So the story continues, and everybody who is there, whether they are artists like composers, musicians, and dancers, and writers, or they are just the people who do all kind of work and just live in Kherson. They all together telling the story of the city. The idea is, it's like a Greek choir. It all comes together. And at the end, you see the story told from different angles. The song that you hear in the beginning and the end is performed by a 16-year-old, now 17-year-old high school student who is studying music and singing with the artillery booming outside of her window.
You also showed a Ukrainian soldier. I believe he was a soldier, but his wife and kids are refugees somewhere in Europe, I'm assuming. But he's only seen them maybe twice in the last 2 or 3 years, and all the other times, or no, maybe he hasn't seen them in 2 or 3 years, but all he gets is photographs. He's seeing the pictures of his young children getting bigger and growing up, and he's missing it. He's just simply not there for them. That's something I hadn't considered now that this war has been going on for 3.5 years. For Ukrainian men staying in the country who have family members, especially small children, living abroad, they're missing these moments. They're missing holidays and birthdays and seeing their children grow up. I thought that was a human moment that I hadn't considered given the duration of this war. It just keeps going and going. And yeah, these are precious years in a young child's life that parents are unfortunately are missing. But for the people of Kherson, I guess, do they have hope that this war will turn out and they'll be able to save their city, be able to restore it eventually, even if it takes decades? Like you said, people of Kherson view themselves as invincible, but is there still hope or optimism in the city? Is there still motivation for people to carry on daily life to the best they can under such horrific conditions?
Well, yeah, and also, everybody's different. It's not like some homogeneous mass that they all feel, and I feel like on a different day, people feel differently, and they don't necessarily always feel that they are invincible. They have down moments, and they have the moments of despair, and we speak about it. But then what is more remarkable, and what I think is more important, that they do believe, pretty much everyone who's staying there now, they believe that that's their land, that's their city, their country, that they are defending their home, and that gives them the strength to continue and to stay, to fight, even if it's fighting just by going to a grocery store or to do yoga or to stay at home and take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of the animals. There's still a lot of animals there. You'll see them in my film. Ukrainians are incredibly dedicated to their pets, to their gardens, to their birds, fruit. They're very connected to the land and everything that is alive. And I believe that is the part of the strength. It's not just this urban machine. It's like one alive body or organism, breathing one. And yes, I mean, my feeling that overall people are remarkably optimistic, even though they are realistic. they are not delirious, Jake. They are not lost in some fantasy land. They know very well who is on the other side and what's awaiting them every minute of the day. But they also stand their ground because it's theirs. That's one of the major things there. They feel that they are right. They have the truth, and that, I believe, gives them that force, that power to overcome daily, hourly attacks. Just today, one of the people featured in the film, the grocery store owner, Olga, the woman with the different hair color that you see going through pretty much every stage, always losing something and her business being under attack. She called me today, and I shared the video on my X and on other social media, that something new happened, and that the drone dropped something so powerful that the glasses in all the buildings around were shattered. And she and her friend were injured by the shards of the glass flying much further than ever before. And she is a very powerful woman, rarely sounding scared, but she sounded quite disturbed, but saying that if they started to use something like this is a new stage, and there will be a lot more grief and a lot more pain. And the question is, how much more grief and pain can one city take? But still, she said, so tomorrow they're going to go back and help this one person they were going to help today, but were not able to do it because of that explosion. But they're coming back, and they're doing it tomorrow nevertheless.
I know on the ground in Ukraine, there has to be tens of thousands of foreign volunteers, foreign aid workers, people who are not Ukrainian, who have gone to the country to do what they can to help. But as far as international journalists, people providing on-the-ground first-hand reporting in English that I can scrape from social media, for my audience, I always correct them. I am not a journalist. I am not giving first-hand accounts. I'm a commentator. I'm an analyst. I'll provide my opinion and my thoughts on what first-hand information I get from people like you, Zarina, which is why I really appreciate it. But I'm thinking back over the last 3 years, and it's Dylan Burns, Kaylin Robertson, John Sweeney, not non-Ukrainians providing first-hand English accounts. And am I just missing them? I understand, there's the big players, NBC, BBC, but they mostly just go to the capital city of Kyiv and then with the background shots give their reports. But am I missing them? Are there people on the ground doing the investigative work to get it out on social media or YouTube or whatever? Or is there really just this deficit? Is there just this tremendous lack of information not coming out of the country? Possibly because it's safe, possibly because the war has been going on for over 3 years now. I just want to get your general thoughts and reactions on the international community reporting on the ground in Ukraine.
Very good, and not an easy question to answer. Well, the easy part is about the major publications and major broadcasting channels. They have very strict policy, insurance policy, which doesn't allow journalists to be in places as dangerous as Kherson for extended period of time. So my colleagues from, say, the Washington Post or New York Times or The Guardian would come to visit, but they would only be there for 2 hours or 3 hours or maybe several days, but they would leave and stay in safer places, say in Mykolaiv or Odessa, comparatively safer, compared to the frontline zone. They have a number of things that make their work harder in a way. Even though they have more resources, they don't have the freedom. They have security guard, it's required. They have a producer, they have a translator, a fixer, a driver, they have an armored vehicle. And when this entourage arrives, half people in Kherson just don't want to speak to them because they're afraid. It's just too scary, when it's just me with a phone or Kalen, it's easier than this whole group and international delegation arriving. And also a lot of this publication wouldn't allow their journalists who might be willing to go closer to the river, where it's still allowed by the Ukrainian military accreditation rules, but way too dangerous by the rules and regulations of these publications. So that kind of limits it. It's much harder to work when you're in the place only for 2 hours. And especially if you're there, say, at the time where everybody's expecting a guided aerial bomb and hiding, and you arrive downtown Kherson and you see an empty city and nobody is there, and you turn around and go, and what do you have to do? You write that we've seen no one. But for somebody like myself or Kalen or independent journalist, freelance independent journalist, we can choose to leave and stay if we're allowed by the Ukrainian military administration. But that could take weeks to wait for. And, while you're waiting, you're not producing anything, you're not making any money. It's a tricky situation, it's hard. So for many freelancers, it's difficult to, especially the new ones to Ukraine, it's difficult to get to those hard to report from zones. And that, you see, it makes it harder and harder and harder. And then there's I think a level of personal security that each freelance journalist is deciding for themselves. Some decide that it's okay to be for a long time in a place where your risk is higher, and some decide that they prefer to be in a safer place, and that's fine. We all decide where we want to be. There are a lot of important stories in Kyiv, in Odessa, in Lviv, and these places are not safe either. They are unsafe. But as a result of all the above said, and the language barrier, and in a way, the trust that you need to build, that takes time, all of this makes it harder to work in Kherson. In Kherson, people are very paranoid after being occupied. They need to know you for a long time before they open up to you. I live there. I go to buy bread, I go exercise, I go to the theater, I hang out, I'm in the park with my friends who are walking the dogs, and people get to know me. And after a year, they decide to open up and tell me their stories. If somebody is there just for a week and they don't speak Ukrainian or the dialect or Russian, it's much harder for them to establish this connection. So that, and I'm not talking just Kherson, say Sumy region, for instance, is another area which needs coverage really badly. And I've been there reporting, but I can't be everywhere at the same time. And I really wish, and I know some people who are in Sumy now and working, and I'm very thankful for that. But we certainly need more people to do this work. I'm with you on that. And being active, proactive, and film, and not be afraid. And I hope it's not too long, but you got something that does interest me and concerns me. Some people are perfectionists, and they believe that something they can just film with the phone is not good enough. And some of us are better than others. Like, say, Kalen is a professional film director and cameraman, and his output is much better quality-wise than mine. And I could sit there and bite my nail and say, oh my God, like I cut and chopped part of somebody's hat, and, it's all crooked, or, you were adjusting my position on the camera. But at some point, you just need to let go and say, hey, you're in the war zone. It might be blurry, but that's the only chance to show what is really happening. And just go for it and say it. Hey, I suck at filming, but I want to tell the story.
It really does come down to the platform. If people are trying to get news and information, they're either on Threads, Blue Sky, or Twitter, and you're putting out a 720p handheld video, that's good enough. You know, that's not good enough for my 4K Ultra HD TV when I'm looking to be entertained in the evening. That's when people will turn on NBC News and they want the crystal sharp picture, the clear audio. But for social media, the threshold has gotten a lot lower. If you're providing good information and value, people will sacrifice on, you know, quality. It doesn't have to be 4K. Doesn't have to be the best. Doesn't have to be background music. As long as you're giving me good information that I'm not getting anywhere else. Like you have the exclusives, because I'm just not on social media seeing the pictures and videos consistently about, you're right, the stories in Sumi and the stories where there just isn't a lot of English language coverage.
Or Nikopol, but that's where I want to jump in and say that's, you know, the whole different genre. Like the film, the documentary out now, it's all in 4K and it was color graded by the experts who are the best of the best. You know, in London, the Jason Parkinson, he worked in Kherson as a videographer and a journalist, and he knows the color scheme of Kherson. So he spent months color grading every single shot. So and then we had the sound remixer and sound designer in Canada, who's Ukrainian, who worked on the film, and we had a team, and that's why the film is a film. That's a high quality, you know, something that we worked on for 2 years, and it's a different genre, right? But this short reports from today, anyone basically can do it as long as they are objective and they are staying true to the facts. The journalistic standards are important, I believe. You need to verify everything. You need to correct something if you got a number wrong, or if you reported something that was reported by the local channels and found out that it was wrong. You need to come back and have the guts to say, guys, I was wrong. That was not reported right. Let's fix it. These journalistic standards are very important. The quality, you can debate it. You know, you can say I'm wrong, but that's my approach.
Sadly, those journalistic standards don't really exist on most social media platforms and most social media users. I do my best. I really do. So we're coming up on an hour here, Zarina. I know you're in the United States right now. My question is, are you planning on going back to Ukraine? And if so, what is your motivation for once again going back?
Oh, absolutely. I'm here. That's my second time during the 3 years that I'm visiting home on an emergency. And to be honest with you, I can't wait to get back. I wouldn't say it's my home. My home is here in the States. I lived here most of my life, but I feel that what I'm doing there is important. That's my major motivation. Like you said, there's not that many reporting from places like Kherson, Nikopol, Sumy, and I can go there and I can bring the world the story, and that story is playing a role in the information warfare, in the hybrid warfare. And this is where I don't want to turn into like a, too official, too formal of a speech maker, but it is incredibly important to understand that the war is not just happening in Ukraine. The war is happening in the information space. And that's, Jake, why what you are doing is so important. It's a weapon. The information is a weapon. And one might argue that it could be more important than the weapons that the Ukrainians are using on the ground. Because let's say if there's the advance of Ukrainians in the Kherson region anytime soon, and it's not reported or it's distorted by the Russians, there's no advantages of such a move. That's why the job of a war journalist, becomes so important. And that's where I see my role is. And as soon as I can, I am back. I'm back in Kherson. I'm going to show this film everywhere I can. It's available now for free easily with one click of the button. And I plan to make it as available as possible to everyone. And my goal is to share this knowledge, to continue reporting, and eventually bring the people responsible for these war crimes and crimes against humanity, as now has been established by both the United Nations and Human Rights Watch, to the tribunals, and to see the justice done, and to follow this whole war to the victory. That's my personal goal.
We share a personal goal. My entire life right now is dedicated, once again, on all these social media platforms to make as much noise as I can to try and make a difference. And I know I am. I know I am making a difference. But yes, there's nothing else in this world I want more than to see Russia defeated. I want Putin dead, and I want Russia held accountable, and I want this war to end the human suffering, and just allow people to get back to their normal lives, to have a normal life where you can just sleep the whole 8 hours every evening and not have to worry about air sirens, about drones being dropped as you're trying to take your kid to daycare or go to the grocery store. Just horrendous. And I don't know how we've put up with this for so long, and the international community is just continuing to let it spiral out of control. We could digress, Zarina. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your on the ground reports. And I'm going to say thank you once again for going back and putting your life at risk. Living in the city of Kherson under these conditions, you're putting your life at risk. Very few people are willing to do something like that. So thank you so much. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
Yes, I want to thank you, Jake. And if we had more time, of course, a journalist in me wants to immediately interview you and ask you what motivates you. But that might be some other interview, because I know we're running out of time now. But not knowing your personal motivation, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know from the people of Kherson and from the people of Ukraine for doing what you are doing. It's a lot of work, and you've done tremendous difference on not just information wise, but also collecting the money and the funds for the military. And thank you. Really can't thank you enough for that. And again, the last message, the message is in the film. You know, watch the film. Message is not from me. The message is from the people of Kherson. There are no foreign journalists speaking to you in this film. They are all the residents of Kherson, and they will tell you what they want you to hear. So, you know, it's free. It's 72 minutes. Just maybe make this effort for the sake of humanity, and I will be very, very grateful.
All right. Thank you again, Zarina. To everyone at home, take care.
Thank you, Jake.